Welcome to Imaginative Visions Journeys, where creators from the entertainment world discuss their journey to turning their dreams into reality. With your host, Justin D. Williams.
Welcome to Imaginative Visions Journeys, episode 6. This is Justin here, and today we have a really great guest. We have director, filmmaker, writer Erica Eng, and we are going to be talking about her short film, Americanized, which has been all over film festivals, getting awards, and a whole lot. We're going to be talking about a little bit about her origins, her journey, and of course, as we all know, Americanized. So Erica, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And let's just kick this off with our first section, origins. Do you remember the first moment or that moment that you fell in love with film?
You know, I was doing photography a little bit before. My dad was kind of teaching me a little bit. But I think like the moment I realized I really loved filmmaking as a whole when I was 15 and I was interning at KDOL, which is a local Oakland TV station. And I was on a lunch break from my internship. And I was like, I really like this. I was surrounded by cameras and those jibs and learning about, the tape decks and, transcribing. And something about moving around that studio made me really happy. And it felt like a home. And that was before I ever shot anything myself.
Oh, wow. So basically, you just fell in love with the camera, first of all.
I liked making stuff with my hands. I think like I've always been a very hands-on person. And, I wasn't a great at school. I didn't want to read anything. I just wanted to watch TV all day like any other kid. I would watch cartoons. And I just like running around and like, at first I thought I wanted to be in construction because I just love working with my hands. I like building things and touching things and moving things around. So I'm a very active person. And I think filmmaking was a way to kind of paired together like just that energy of just like I want to make something with my hands but also expressing myself creatively.
And we're definitely going to touch about growing up in Oakland because that's kind of the main focus of Americanized, which is something I really liked as well because it's such a melting pot of just different styles, different cultures all come into one. We're going to touch a little bit about more on that in a bit, but a little bit more about your origins. So that was the main first introduction. So when was your real first time you decided that you were going to actually shoot something?
Well, I was from that internship when I was a teenager. I was in a after school program. It's open to like Oakland Public School students. And I was learning like editing. I was learning how to shoot, 3-point, lighting setups. And my mentors at the time who brought me into the program, I was one of their first students. They're like, you should just direct your own short. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Because we direct our own like scenes for, filming stuff, filming students. We'll do our own scenes, but we have other people help out. It's all a collaboration. But this is the first time leading a shoot. And I had no idea what a shot list was, how to put together a schedule. Like he was telling me, they're old school. So they're telling me how to do a schedule through strips, how you take apart your shot list and move the strips around in a board to figure out your schedule. And as a teenager, I had no idea what I was doing. I was so scared. But, through their guidance, I made my first short film when I was like a teenager, and that one hit the festival circuit. So I was like 16, 17 at the time and hitting the festival circuit. And it did really well for the youth categories in a lot of film festivals. And the biggest one we won was the San Francisco International Film Festival. And I won the grand prize as a youth and $5,000. So I took the money from that festival and I was like, I want to make my own production company now. Like I did my first film, now I have that and now let's make more. So I bought like a Canon DVX 100B and a pair of Sennheiser lavaliers and a MacBook Pro with Final Cut Pro 7 and just kind of made my own little production company and started shooting music videos and documentaries on the Bay Area.
Wow, man, that's impressive because you just basically just jumped in face forward, just fell right into it, which I always admire about other creators. They just jump right into it the minute they find that passion. They know exactly what they're gonna go for.
I
So
think also too, as a teenager, you're kind of dumb and
yeah.
like you kind of throw things against the wall. So I almost had no fear because people are like, you'll be fine. And as a kid, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna be fine. As an adult, I tell my we would joke all the time with friends, like we would never do this as adults. Like we'd be too scared. We know too many things.
Exactly. Who were some of your filmmaking influences growing up?
I want to be Spike Jones through and through. I still do. In my lifetime, I wish I could have a career like Spike Jones, of course. And Michelle Gondry. But I really love Spike Jones. One, he also, did the skate video thing, did the music video thing, did the short film thing, did the commercial, did the TV, the feature thing. So just his trajectory. But I also admire Spike Jones for his freeness and creativity of not being just being creative. Like on his director's DVD, I don't know if you've seen his collections. It's called the director's DVDs or something like that. And each DVD is like Chris Cunningham, Michelle Gondry, Spike Jones, and there's one video in between, like an intermission between his videos, and it's literally a long shot, a long take of a door stopper, and he just flicks it. And you just hear the sound kind of dither off, and then it cuts to the next video. I'm like, oh my God, that's so funny that he did that. One, but two, it's so common that we don't think about. Like he thinks about things of the mundane that we forget about, and he makes it magical. And when you're thinking of like a low budget filmmaker who doesn't have much, you think about what can we have and what can we use that we have right now? How do we make that magical? And I think he does that. Like he did that back in the day with a lot of his work, but he continues to make magic, but of course on larger scales. But as a short filmmaker and as someone who doesn't have any money, like it's such a great representation of what you can do.
Which I definitely agree with that. Especially when the way he shot things and the way he put things together, just from a storytelling standpoint as well. It was just
how he observes, yeah.
Yeah. And next question is something I really was fascinated about was you growing up in Oakland, which is basically the main premises of Americanized. Can you talk about what was that like a little bit of growing up in Oakland? Because we see a little bit, a glimpse of it in Americanized, and I'm like, after watching it, I was like, I want more. I really want more.
Where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm New York. I'm New York.
Okay, what part of New York?
Queens. Grew up in
Okay.
Queens. So but me watching this, and I've been to Oakland. I've been to Oakland once when I went to go visit my best friend, and I was watching this, and just it reminded me of just a lot of New York and just New York high schools as well, because everything is such a melting pot, and especially with hip hop culture being such a big thing at the time, everybody was just into the hip hop culture. I mean, everybody had their groups. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian. And one thing I did like was Eng, the character Eng, played by Terry Who, was rocking the braids.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the perfect title for this, because it really was.
Everybody had braids. Cultural appropriation wasn't even a term that everyone used. It was just like a thing that people associated, in my opinion, with culture and with like coolness to say, but like of course we're understanding and we're appreciating with the sources of it, of the hip hop culture and Black American culture. And I think that's really important to talk about, because I feel like whenever we're talking about Asian American stories and being Americanized, being whitewashed, I think the comparison is always being one to be white, blonde hair, blue eyes, whatever. But from where I'm from, it was almost an insult to be called white, because it's just like, you know what I mean?
Yes,
so
I do.
It's hard to call white per se. So it was more like if you were down or whatever, then you were more about like the hip hop culture, or like, you know, Oakland's actual just like street culture. And I think like that was the most popular thing. That's all the kids were trying to do. And so I think that it's kind of funny doing the whole braids thing and doing the appropriation thing, because I think it really falls along with the story of like, she doesn't know what her culture is. She's just trying to figure out what it is. Whether you do blonde hair, blue eyes, that's still like appropriating, like it's still trying to be whatever. It's just her version of what American is. And that should be a version that people should be talking about. Like, what is American? Why does it have to be white? It's not white anymore.
No, it isn't. Everything is a melting pot here. And that's one thing I really, really took from it. It was just like, just watching it and just seeing like the opening scene when Eng is talking to her grandmother, and grandmother's talking to her in Chinese, and she absolutely has no idea. She was just like, "Grandma, I don't understand what you're saying."
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that. It's very fast, but yeah, my grandma does speak Chinese. She speaks a version of Cantonese. I don't know what she says, and I think even when we go to restaurants, I think sometimes they understand what you're saying, but my family doesn't speak it. They had to relearn it.
Oh,
So my
wow.
dad doesn't speak Chinese at all. My mother, of course, does not. So I never grew up speaking any other language besides English. And so when you're a kid and you're like, oh, rep your culture, it's like, oh no, what do you mean by that? And I don't speak the language. We cook Chinese food, but like our version of Chinese food, that sometimes we Google. Like I had to Google how to make soy sauce chicken, and it does not taste how it should be tasting. Stuff like that. Like I have to Google all these recipes. It's not something that's innate. The things that are innate are things that my grandmother does. So later on in my 20s, I think I realized what my Chinese identity was until like my late 20s. And to me, it's my connection with my grandmother because she's like my cultural roots. And that's where a lot of my culture comes from.
And that's also important to just to know your history as well, and just to know and that's one thing. Like even me growing up, like I'm a huge fan of anime. I'm a huge fan of J-pop and everything else like that.
Yeah.
So it kind of like fused. Like that's why the website we have is Talks to Geeks as well, which is fusing of Western geeks and the East geeks and just put it together.
Yep.
And that's just basically how we came about with that as well. And
Uh-huh.
another thing I wanted to just talk about is because you played ball, because I saw you
Yeah.
played ball. I saw the pictures in the
Yeah.
press release. I was like, okay, you played ball. So
Yeah.
so talk about a little bit about high school and and where the main focus of Americanized is focused on is during that high school period. So how was it being in that predominantly hip hop culture type of high school era,
Yeah.
and you also just trying to find balance your two cultures at the same time?
Of course. I mean, I think that I was experimenting with where, everyone has a friend group,
Mm.
and sometimes friend groups are separated by race. But I think my groups never were because it was kind of a hodgepodge of people that didn't belong in other groups. And so mine was always diverse because we felt left out of their group. So mine was always like a mismatch. But yeah, at some point I tried to hang out with the ASU, Asian Student Union kids. I felt a little shade there, and I also feel like their culture is so different, and they were so on the same wavelength that I couldn't be on the same wavelength. So I felt discouraged by that, and that's an internalized thing that I felt. But at the same time, I was playing basketball since I was a teenager, since like 13. So I played other leagues before that in middle school, when I was younger. So by high school, it's like, well, yeah, of course I'm gonna try out for the team. So I was on the basketball team. I was the only Asian kid my freshman year. But it didn't really matter, and I didn't notice it until people were like calling it out, because it's a thing that you don't think about, of course, in a school that's so culturally diverse that you're like, well, yeah. But in the locker rooms it's just funny because we're just all so different. But at the same time, like, they never cared I was Asian. It was never even a conversation. It was more like, you care if you're good on the court. So if you had a bad game, or if you fucked up during practice and made us do suicides, like, you're gonna get shitted on. So what I wanted to convey with this team was like, on the Asian kids, the ego was just more like about self and identity and culture. And then on the team, it's all just player ego. So that incites a lot of like issues when you're doing bad on the court or whatever. It causes a lot of conflict. And so there are two different cultures to talk about.
And that's one thing I always was fascinated, especially when it comes to sports, that is always, once you get on the court, race, identity, none of that matters. It's
No,
about how
if you're good or
you
not,
play.
100%. If you don't fuck up the game, if you don't fuck up practice and make us do runs or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that's all that matters. And that's what I wish I can do like a longer version of it, because I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to athletes. And I think that too, there's not many films or shows of female athletes that feel like Friday Night's True. Like, we beat each other up on the court. You know what I mean? You don't see that with a lot of people. So I want to see them like pushing and elbowing each other, because that's what it was. Like, we're just angry kids that hated people and things, and we're like teenagers, and you just take it out on the court.
Exactly. And another question I want to ask is, let's talk a little bit about the writing process of Americanized. So obviously this is a little based on your life. So what part when you started writing the script, when did you decide, okay, this is the part I wanted to talk about right here?
I mean, so Americanized is a lot of it's based on true experiences from when I was a kid up until even now as an adult, but culminated in one day in the life of a teenage girl. So a lot of the dialogue is true, a lot of the instances are true. I knew I wanted it to be about a breakup of a friendship because it came from so I used to dance in high school, and there's this girl that like I was cool with who was a dancer also, and we were cool in class but not in the hallways.
Hmm.
And it's such an easy way to think about like the dynamics of high school, where you're cool like in the situation you're supposed to be cool in, whether it's in the team or in class. But when you leave class or you leave the team, you don't really sit together at lunch. You don't really talk to each other in the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, there's a situation where in the bathroom, her cousin tried to get her to beat me up. And I feel like we were like nose to nose. And I remember looking at her, and I knew she didn't want to fight me. It was more because of the pressure of her cousin. It was a long story.
It's always the cousins.
It's always the cousin. She's like, you want to talk shit about you like that? I was like, well, I was not even doing anything like that. I was like inciting something. And she was honestly, I walked in on a moment they were having. I threw out a joke because we have an inside joke. And then her cousin didn't know it. So she's like, are you going to talk shit about my cousin? I'm like, no, it's like our thing. But she didn't say anything. Mm-hmm. So she's like, I'll go fight her or whatever. It was just the three of us. And so she like kind of walked up to me out of pride. She did it very slowly, like she didn't really want to run up on me. But it was like a moment of like, we both don't want to do this. So I just like dropped her and ran because I was like, but I think what I wanted to get that feeling of is like high school has so many of, it's not as easy as popular and unpopular. You have so many of these like nuanced like individualism between these groups, whether it's on the team, whether it's in class, whether it's ASU kids, like there's so many rules that you have to follow that are invisible. And so I knew the story was about a breakup of a friendship. I knew it ended in a fight. I didn't know how to begin it or end it. So I wrote an outline, like 50 outlines. And I told my friend, I read it out loud because whatever. And then I was like, and then she gets punched, and I told her about the grandmother, and she's like, that's a beautiful story. I'm like, no, that's the beginning. That's just the introduction. I didn't even write the whole film. She's like, no, that's the film. It's a day in the life of a girl. So she's a screenwriting professor. She helped identify, like, it's just about that one moment leading up to the punch. So I understood that and walked it back and was trying to find the nuance to kind of gain it there. I think that's why Stephanie, the other character, is such a strong character, and she has the most arc to really go through emotionally. So I really strengthened her character because it really just had to do with her and Stephanie, really.
Which was just because I don't want to spoil the ending, but
what
you alluded to, yeah, what you alluded to was just like that's where I was just like, wow, because I wasn't expecting that when I was watching it. I was like, I because the way their relationship was in the beginning, you're just like, okay, she was supporting her because she was getting ripped on because she was getting benched, and then when she got put into the game, and then she did what she did, and then we got that complex like, oh man, I was not expecting that. And it was just like that break. It was like, wow, that's a nice twist, because that was just like, you was not expect. I mean, I had a feeling that, okay, she's gonna triumph.
That can't be that easy.
Yeah, I didn't expect that something else was gonna fall. Like, okay, there's that high came, and then boom.
Yeah.
And then it just ends on this kind of somber note, but at the same time, it really makes you want to know more about the story. And and we're gonna head to the next section, which is every journey has some roadblocks, some challenges. So what was some of your challenges of getting the project together, whether it was writer's block or filming, or what was some of your challenges?
I can't even talk about writer's block because everyone knows that's a thing. I mean, this is my first screenplay, so it took me like a year and a half, 2 years to even get it on the page and to refine it in a way. So it's definitely like 30 drafts for 16 pages. But so I'm not even going to talk about that. But I mean, it is a low budget short. If you're anyone out there who's doing a low budget short, don't do sports. It's very difficult. It's difficult because of resources. You needed 2 cameras, you need an audience, you need a team. So it's like you had to cast a whole basketball team and the team that you were actually on. So not only that, like, the talent pool had inflated, but I had a really great producer, Simran Mahal, who really held it down. She's a local Bay Area producer, and she asked like a lot of the community to help, whether it be like donating equipment or getting people up here to go from LA to the Bay to work locally. She really pieced together this production that felt like it was really supported by the community, and the Bay community wanted to support it. So that was a really, really great, lovely feeling of having everyone being so supportive. But we prepped for like months. Like my personal prep was like 8 months, because I had to go back and forth from LA to the Bay to like see my teacher, because we filmed at my old high school. My old teacher, Mr. Fry, who told me I should be in film, I asked him for help, and so he helped me get Skyline. So I kept going back and forth from the Bay to here. So like that much prep led to 4-day shoot. That weekend of the shoot just so happened to be the same weekend as the Oakland fires. Like across the Bay Area, there's tons of wildfires because of like, I don't know, global warming. And so they're going to shut down the power to help ease the spread of fire. It just so happened the one weekend that was the worst was our shooting weekend. And so they were going to shut down power to Skyline High School, which is in the hills, the whole weekend, and we were shooting the whole weekend. So the day before the shoot, my producer Simran, my AD Dominic, Martin, I'm sure they're having a moment, but at the same time, like they're trying to pick out scenes that were all natural light. Maybe we can shoot that first, maybe the power come on later. We're going to rerun to schedule the day before the shoot. How do we do this? And I remember just having a moment of like, everyone flew here or drove here from LA. We have an immense amount of crew and extras and equipment waiting for us. If it doesn't happen, then it's just meant to happen that way.
Yeah.
And we would have had to stop the shoot, and it would have killed me, because this is my savings. And I had a very easy calm about like, maybe this is good. Maybe pressure makes diamonds. Every shoot has chaos, and sometimes chaos gives off this energy of triumph in a way. And I was like sipping on some whiskey at 11 a.m. and having my moment and thinking, you know what? Fuck it. If it doesn't work, then we'll work it out next year. If it doesn't, great. And so it did. The power went on at least by noon. So we shot natural light at the first half of the day, and then we were able to get power at noon. So we shot our film.
and that's one thing I it's just always something. That's
always something.
There's always something.
Pressure makes diamonds, y'all. Like, I think I've had some shoots that went fine. Like, it was like, it was easy going, and everyone had a really relaxed day. We wrapped on time or early. But my favorite projects are the ones that we overcome that hurdle, not because we overcame the hurdle or because there was a hurdle, but I think it was something, I don't know, to do with the energy of everyone is hyper concentrated because so much is going wrong and we don't want anything else to go wrong. I think something about that energy collectively works sometimes. And I'm not saying all the time, I'm not saying try to make it happen, but don't freak out if something bad happens. And then if it does happen, you have talented people working with you, and trust your team. And I had a really, really great team.
And that's one thing I also want to discuss really quickly, was that you touched a little bit of that. You said jokingly, don't film sports for your first
You don't do it.
Like, because I was watching the basketball scenes was really good. So how many takes does it take, for them to actually get the shot in? And
a lot of people ask me that, which I love that people want to know that, because it is harder to film sports, one, but two, first of all, the game in my head, I mapped it out shot wise and emotional beat wise, that I was uber prepared. I did a camera map of the whole gym floor, so I knew the camera placement for each beat of the game, and also the play in the game was actually written into the script. So of course, because I play basketball and I had a consultant, Tiffany Pack, who works for the Warriors, she was able to lend her expertise too as a coach. And really, she's not a coach on the Warriors, she's a coach in general. But she was able to lend her eye to the beats also in the script. So one, I camera mapped it. Two, I covered it with my DP Drew Daniels. But three, like, yeah, the plays were already set. It's no like guessing where the ball's gonna go. So we had beats where we're just focusing on the actors and the emotional arc. And we had beats where just to cover shot in the basket. So our B camera, Tyler McFerron, a great DP in the Bay Area. He was our second B cam op. We got a couple of shots in there just for cutaways, just in case that happens. But you know, Stephanie, I mean, Amber Gaston from that was Stephanie. She played ball, so she made some baskets when she wasn't supposed to. She's supposed to be missing the ball. And then Tori was played by Sahara Ali Speaks, and she was a D1 college basketball player. So she kept making the ball because Scotland was supposed to be losing, and they kept making baskets. I was like, you guys, we got to cut it and then have them miss it, but miss it the right way. So Sahara is such a pro. I'm like, I want to bank off the right side and then hit left. So she knew how to bank it. So it hits and then we get the rebound. So that's like the whole moment of making the shot at the end of the game. Sorry, spoilers. But so one, I had some really great talent. Two, coverage, of course. Our lead player, Terry, never played ball, never touched a ball, never dribbled one. So I had to coach them in how the etiquette of like the posture, just like the fundamentals of how to shoot, how your elbow looks, everything 2 weeks before the shoot. So they had to accomplish a whole lot. It's just body language. Like if your upper body shows it and you know where it's going to go, even and having that control, then it looks convincing, but a lot of it is body language. So I had to teach her the body language and then teach her just, you know, the elbow thing, of course, if everyone knows the elbow thing, something like that to make it look real.
That's impressive because I was watching, I was like, how do you pull this off? Because I could just imagine it in my head because like the amount of preparation just for the actors as well. Like you just said, Terry never played, so imagine it's like she had to learn like quickly how to dribble the ball, how to keep the posture. What position did you play? You played point guard.
I never played point. Goodness me. I played small forward, but I was more of a shooting guard. Okay. I was playing shooting guard. I thought I wanted to be a small forward. I played small forward my last year of basketball because I had a better shot than a better dribble, but I wasn't fast enough for a small forward. But if anyone shoots basketball, what I would say is that we shot all the close-ups at the first part of the day with no audience. So you only saw one half of the court and it was only focused on the emotional beats because Stephanie has 3 beats of failure: missing the basket, falling down, and then losing the ball. So those beats were isolated and we covered those emotional beats. So when the audience came, we just kind of covered the wideness of the room and the coverage of just like moving around the court with the 2 cameras. But it was more important that the emotional beats were there because it's not just a sports film, it's a drama. Yeah. So that has to be really apparent. And just like we're able to isolate every single beat with Stephanie, isolate it with Terry. Yeah.
And we're going to go to the next section, which is called Destination. So obviously filming's done. You're going to the film festivals. It's finally out there. People are seeing it. You're getting nominated for awards. You're winning some awards in some of these film festivals. How did it feel that your baby was out there? And was it just a sign of relief, or what were you going through when it first screened and going through the motions?
Well, I'm the kind of person where nothing's perfect and everything is okay. So when I finished my editor is going to kill me, but because I also edit too, unfortunately. So we passed back and forth the edit, even after edit lock, even after we locked picture, I still tinkered with it and it drove everyone nuts. And at some point it just had to be done. So when we were releasing and I was like, I hope it works. Because I don't know if anything's good. You're so in your head. You're like, oh, is it mixed well? I can hear this and that. I still hear like things in the mix I don't like. So there's always something, but I think I had to make peace with a lot of decisions I made and a lot of things that I had to eat because of production reasons, because of these reasons. But I think ultimately the validation kind of came from people liking it. And so I don't think I liked it until other people liked it. And unfortunately, I'll have to get over that eventually in my life. Right?
I'm the same way. I'm the same way when it comes to my comics. It's like when I was writing my first two, and the third one I'm writing right now. I'm always like the first time, like I love it, and then I'm just like, I could have changed this. I'm like, it's
Always
this that
something.
perfectionist
Yep.
in us, and I noticed that with a lot of my guests, like we all have this like,
Yep.
I wish I could have just went back and do this, and maybe if I could just, you know what, I'm just gonna release a new version of it, just gonna update it and just change this little thing right here.
It's about that new version.
Yeah,
I stopped doing director's cuts because at the end of the day, what I'm realizing, because I mean, I've made like some stuff. I
mm,
mean, like sometimes I get like 100 views. Who's gonna watch a director's cut on the same video that barely got 100 views? Like no one cares that
exactly.
much. You care. And so I had to, in a way, care less,
Mm.
but in a productive way of like, hey, it's done and move on. You have other things to do. And I think more my journey as a filmmaker is like letting it go and letting it be.
And final section we're gonna ask you is it's called the road ahead. So, is there anything that you could tell us about probably next projects or something else that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it can be turned into, a series or a feature. I mean, I think we're still kind of working on that. But I just finished my next short film. It's nothing that I wrote, but it's called Off Fairfax. And it's about three friends who try to solve one of America's biggest crime mysteries. So that's more of like a drama thriller world, which is kind of what I like to do. Of course, it's like, emotion drama thriller. So yeah, I'm in post on that doing sound. So we'll see what happens with that one.
And how can people follow you? You have any public social media that fans can follow you and keep up to date?
Of course, Instagram and Twitter is Miss Erica Eng, MISSERICAENG, and my website is just ericaeng.com, ERICAENG.com.
And thank you, Erica, and everybody. This has been Imaginative Visions Journeys. This is episode 6. Erica, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Hopefully, we'll have you back next year to talk about your next projects. We'll keep you up to date with everything. Thank you very much.
I love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for Imaginative Visions Journeys. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from Imaginative Visions, you can visit imaginativevisions.com.